Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between my Gibson USA Les Paul Standard 50s and my not green, but double gold, which is green gold, Gibson Custom 1957 Les Paul Goldtop VOS. I'm partially colorblind. That guitar might look completely green in this video. I'm sorry, it's my eyes. They're horrible. But for the comparison today, we have 5 different sound samples, the last of which, because it is this channel, is a full-on metal sound sample. But there's 2 things I want to touch on here really quickly. This guitar here, Canadian, is $4,000. This guitar here, Canadian, is $6,700. Throw tax on top of that, means these are considered expensive guitars. Some people out there sort of get a little upset when you talk about expensive guitars for some reason. So if that's you, just don't watch the video. And YouTube videos are fantastic. They allow you to actually listen to 2 guitars that you might want to purchase and allows you to get a little bit of a different perspective on them, albeit with someone else's hands, someone else's playing choices, someone else's amp choices, and setting choices. So don't use this video here or any video on YouTube as a sole reason for the reason as to why you're buying a guitar. Make sure you go and play them yourself. Find a store that has the guitar that you're looking at, or maybe 2 different guitars you're looking at, and play the guitar. And then play a whole bunch of other guitars. That's just the best way to see which one really bonds with you. Alright, so there you go. There are all 5 different sound samples for the comparison between the Gibson USA Les Paul Standard 50s and the Gibson Custom 1957 Les Paul Goldtop VOS. Again, double gold is green gold, and I'm partially colorblind, so my stupid eyes might correct this thing to like completely green. I'm sorry. So let's quickly talk about the specs, and then I'll go over how both of these guitars feel to me. So starting off, both have mahogany backs. The Gibson USA is a 2-piece, sometimes 3-piece mahogany back, whereas the Custom Shop is a single-piece lightweight mahogany. Both have single-piece mahogany necks. This has the chunky C-neck profile on it, whereas the Gibson USA has the 50s, which is pretty much the same. There's just ever such of a slight difference between the two. Both have the inlaid Gibson logo on the headstock and the silk-screened Les Paul model logo. The silk-screen is a little higher on the VOS here than it is on the Gibson USA. Both also have the vintage deluxe tuners. The Gibson USA has the modern sizing Gibson vintage deluxe tuners, and the VOS here, the Custom Shop, has actual Kluson vintage sizing vintage deluxe tuners. So basically, if you wanted to get the custom shop and you wanted to add like Grovers or some sort of modern style locking tuner for some reason on a reissue, you would have to remount the holes because the holes here for the tuning or the tuners are a little bit smaller. So you have to actually widen them to fit other tuners through. Both have 2 pieces of maple carved on the top of the mahogany bodies. We have a center seam here on the Les Paul Standard 50s, whereas this one here, I don't know, but historically it should be an off-center seam. Does that matter? Probably not. The Gibson USA has the high gloss nitro finish, whereas the Gibson Custom has the vintage original sheen VOS nitro finish on it. It's a little bit lighter of a finish. That changes things a little bit acoustically, but also the fact that this is an opaque, so that's a solid color, and this is just a stain over wood, changes things as well. Both have the Audio Taper CTS Gibson branded potentiometers. Both of them are hand soldered. The Gibson USA has the orange drop capacitors, whereas the Gibson Custom has the Bumblebee paper and oil capacitors. Both have the Tune-o-matic with a stop bar. The Gibson USA has the ABR1 that has the metal dowling system, whereas the Gibson Custom has the ABR1 with the nickel-plated brass saddles, and it is drilled directly into the body. The Gibson USA has the Burstbucker 2 and the Burstbucker 1 pickups, whereas the Gibson Custom has the Alnico 3 custom bucker unpotted pickups. Both of them are unpotted, by the way. But that's it for the specs. I mean, you could go into a lot more differences, like the glues used. This has hot hide glue. This has, the USA has the tight bond glue. There's just a whole bunch of different nuances to them that do start to add up in the pricing. But let's go ahead and actually talk about how both of these guitars feel to me. We'll start off with the Gibson USA here, because this used to be my favorite guitar that I owned. Before I got all of the VOS custom shop guitars, this was the absolute tippy-top guitar that I owned. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it's non-weight relieved. It's heavier. It's a little heavier than the Gibson custom shop because it does use lightweight mahogany on the custom shop. But the fact that this is a non-weight relieved guitar, it's a little heavier, and it has the chunky C neck profile, or sorry, the Fat 50s neck profile here. It just feels a lot more solid when playing. There is a little bit of resonance loss, so the low end vibration that you feel on your body in comparison to like a weight relieved or a satin nitro guitar. But for the most part, those guitars there, especially the satin nitro, they're almost all resonance without a lot of the presence, so that top end feel. So it doesn't feel as solid as this guitar would here. That makes playing leads very, very comfortable to me. As well, when you're chording or strumming, it's still very comfortable because it does have an overall solid feel to it. And the pickups here are the Burstbucker 2 and 1 combination. They are unpotted pickups. They're not hot pickups. They're what I like to call well-reserved pickups. There is a little bit of skewing on the EQ to add a little more top-end sizzle to it. Not a whole bunch, but it is something that is noticeable, and when you go to your amp, you may want to turn the treble down just a little bit. Not as much as the Burstbucker 60s, which are the 61 R&T, which are very, very hot pickups, and they are skewed on the low end and the high end. This just has a little bit more on the top end, which can come through at times as a little harsh, but not really. And that's something that I've always felt these pickups just work really well with a whole bunch of styles, especially for high gain. For high gain, I do find a well-reserved pickup just works for me a little better because I get to actually dial in the amp a lot better. I'm dialing things in rather than like compensating on the amp, if that makes any sense. Now, taking a look at the Gibson custom shop here, we'll talk about the pickups starting out. So we have the Alnico 3 custom bucker unpotted pickups. Again, the Gibson USA on the standard 50s and the standard 60s are unpotted as well. But these pickups here, in comparison to the Burstbucker 2 and the Burstbucker 1, they are just a little more, like they're still well reserved, but the response is a little more balanced. So there's like this little bit of a sweeter top end to it, so it doesn't come across harsh, at least not to me. So what that means for me is that I don't have to really go and compensate on my amp. So I'm not turning down the treble, because the treble can be a little bit on the harsh side at times. This is a little bit of a sweeter, little more reserved boost in the top end. So again, I'm not compensating on my amp, I'm actually dialing things in as I would want. And with the VOS finish here, because it's a lighter coating, so it's not as much as the high gloss that's on the Gibson USA, or not as thick, really is the way that I should be saying it, that starts to bring back a lot more of that resonance. So it's not like 100% resonance like you would get in the Satin Nitro, or with a weight relieved you get you know, a little less than the Satin Nitro. But the fact that the finish here is a little lighter kind of allows things to breathe a little more, and you get a little more low-end vibration in the playing. You don't lose any of that top end, so you don't lose the presence feeling, so it still feels very, very solid. And with this being a solid painted color, that changes things a little bit. It's really hard to explain, but the 1958 and the 1957 are basically the same guitar, but that has a stained finish, whereas this is a double gold painted finish. Not green. Again, I'm sorry, I'm colorblind. So with a stained, it breathes a little more. You get a little bit more resonance in the playing with it. It's still not losing any of that top end. This, you lose a tiny bit more of the resonance than you would if this were a 1958. And the finish, along with the fact that this has the brass plate, or the nickel-plated brass saddles, the fact that the ABR1 is drilled directly into the body, and if I put a tinfoil hat on here, it does also use the hot hide glue, which fuses a little better, and can actually make everything like into a solid piece. The fact that this is a single piece lightweight mahogany rather than a two-piece, so there's a little less glue in this sucker than the other one. This tends to ring out as one solid piece. So I feel a lot more vibration. It's a little more acoustically louder than the other, or the Gibson USA, and it's just a lot more pleasing for me to play, especially on leads, but it's no slouch in the department of strumming, chording, or anything like that. You can still play very progressive metal on these guitars. The fact that it's, you know, a 50s style guitar does not, you know, really hinder you from doing so. And this is my second favorite guitar that I own, even though, you know, if I have to color correct with my really crappy colorblind eyes, or partially colorblind eyes, this is green. Double gold is considered green gold. So the original golds would start to fade into a little bit more greener color. They kind of fit that into here, and because of that, I see a little bit of green, I can't tell the difference, and the whole guitar looks almost chroma keyed at some points. But in a nutshell, that's really all I have to say in the comparison between both of these. Both of these are fantastic choices. Again, we are talking about expensive guitars, so just don't cry about them, I guess. But play every guitar that's in the store. You could be going in looking for a Les Paul, you could leave with something completely different. People go in looking for Les Pauls and leave with Strats, the other way around as well. So the best thing to do is try out a whole bunch of different guitars, see which ones you really bond with, and those are the guitars you either want to buy now or strive to buy later. Thanks for watching.